In the suffocating embrace of a Lagos morning, where dreams go to die and miracles learn to whisper, 17-year-old Michael Adeyemi pressed his ear against his mother's chest, counting heartbeats like a miser counts his final coins. The zinc roof above them rattled like bones in the harmattan wind, each metallic shiver a percussion section in the symphony of survivor that had become their daily existence. Sarah Adeyemi's breathing came in shallow waves, her fever painting roses across cheekbones that had once been plump with laughter. The scent of palm kernel oil from the street vendors below mingled with the antiseptic smell of poverty, that peculiar fragrance of hope diluted with desperation that clung to the walls of their one-room shelter like morning dew refusing to evaporate. Michael's fingers traced the outline of his mother's face, memorizing the geography of love that had shaped his world since birth. Her skin felt like parchment holding sacred text, each wrinkle a verse in the gospel of sacrifice she had written with her life. Outside, Lagos pulsed with his eternal rhythm, the cacophony of downfall buses belching diesel prayers, hawkers chanting their daily liturgies of pure water, and the distant hum of generators powering dreams in Lekki's golden towers. The morning light filtered through their single window like liquid amber, illuminating dust motes that danced like spirits around his mother's still form. In that moment, suspended between breath and silence, Michael felt the weight of 17 years crystallize into a single burning truth. Love was not enough to pay hospital bills, and dreams could not cure malaria. Yet somewhere, in the hollow chamber of his chest, where hope had learned to speak in whispers, a voice emerged, soft as his mother's lullabies, fierce as Lagos traffic, promising that this was not the end of their story, but the beginning of his most beautiful verse. The morning sun painted Victoria Island in shades of gold and desperation, as Michael bare his bare feet kissed the scorching asphalt, each step a prayer offered to the altar of survivor that had become his daily pilgrimage through the city's gleaming arteries. His stomach sang his familiar song of emptiness, a hollow percussion that harmonized with the rhythm of his footsteps as he wove between the metallic rivers of luxury cars carrying dreams too expensive for boys like him to even glimpse. The contrast struck him like lightning, chrome bumpers reflecting his tattered school uniform, air conditioning humming lullabies for the fortunate, while he walks through heat that rose from the pavement like invisible flames licking at his ankles. Street vendors called to him in pidgin English mixed with Yoruba, their voices creating a tapestry of sound that wrapped around the morning like a familiar embrace. "Michael, my boy, waiting you they find this morning." Mama Kemi's voice floated from her akara stand, concern seasoning her words like the palm oil that glistened on her wares. He smiled that smile he had perfected, the one that said, "I'm fine," in a language that bypassed the truth living in his hollow cheeks. In his plastic bag, carefully folded like a prayer book, lay his school uniform. Each crease had been pressed with the iron of hope, each thread a lifeline connecting him to the world of education that existed just beyond his reach. The uniform was a costume for a play he could no longer afford to star in, yet he carried it like a talisman, a promise whispered to his mother's fever dreams that education remained his North Star, even when hunger tried to rewrite his constellation. As the sun climbed higher, transforming the morning into a furnace of possibility and pain, Michael understood that some kinds of wealth could never be stolen. Not the knowledge that lived in his mind, not the love that lived in his heart, and certainly not the dream that lived in that carefully folded uniform, waiting for its moment to dance again. Beneath the ancient Iroko tree that witnessed Lagos grow from a sleepy fishing village into a concrete giant, Paul Cole sat drowning in calculus while his Nike sneakers, worth more than most families earned in a month, tapped an anxious rhythm against roots that had drunk from the same soil for over a century. The textbook pages fluttered in the afternoon breeze like frustrated butterflies, each equation a hieroglyph in a language that his privileged education had somehow failed to teach his restless mind. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the tree's generous shade, not from the Lagos heat, but from the familiar panic that mathematics always brought. That sensation of being surrounded by a crowd of numbers that spoke a foreign tongue, while he expected him to respond in fluent genius. His father's voice echoed in the chambers of his memory like thunder in a cathedral. Excellence is not negotiable, Paul. The core name opens doors, but only competence walks through them. The weight of generational expectations sat on his shoulders like a school bag filled with stones, each A plus his classmates and adding another pound to the burden of being Richard Cole's son, the tech billionaire's heir who somehow couldn't make sense of simple derivatives. From the corner of his vision, a movement caught his attention. A boy about his age stood near the school perimeter fence, not quite looking at him, but clearly present in a way that felt intentional. Paul recognized him, had seen him lingering by classroom windows, noticed the way teachers' eyes would soften when his name came up in conversations that he was never supposed to overhear. Michael, the scholarship boy who had vanished one day like morning mist, leaving behind whispered stories and empty chairs. The afternoon light painted everything in golden possibilities, as Paul made a decision that would rewrite both of their destinies. Closing his calculus book with the finality of a prayer's amen, he looked directly at the boy who had been watching knowledge through glass and spoke words that would unlock doors neither of them knew existed. As mathematical symbols transformed into musical notes under Michael's gentle guidance, the space beneath the Iroko tree became a cathedral where two souls discovered that learning danced most beautifully when it moved to the rhythm of understanding rather than the march of memorization. Paul's confusion melted like sugar in palm wine as Michael's voice, soft as rainfall on zinc, patient as morning prayers, began weaving stories around algebraic equations. See this X. Michael pointed to the variable with a finger that bore the calluses of survivor. It's not hiding from you. It's waiting to be discovered like a friend behind a mask at a masquerade festival. His explanation painted pictures in the air between them, each word a brush stroke that transformed abstract concepts into tangible truths. The afternoon stretched around them like a golden blanket, as Michael introduced Paul to mathematics through the language of metaphor and melody. Quadratic equations became the rise and fall of Afrobeat rhythms. Logarithms transformed into the echo patterns of talking drums, and calculus derivatives danced like the geometric patterns in traditional Adiri clothes. Paul's pencil began moving with newfound confidence, his handwriting loosening from the tight grip of anxiety into the flowing script of comprehension. "You are not stupid," Michael said quietly, as he watched Paul solve a problem that had tormented him for weeks. You learn differently. Your mind thinks in colors and sounds, not just numbers and letters." The words fell between them like seeds in fertile soil, taking root in places where Paul had always felt barren. For the first time in his academic life, mathematics felt less like a foreign language and more like a song he was finally learning to hum. As the sun began its descent toward the lagoon, painting the sky in watercolors of pink and gold, both boys understood that something miraculous had occurred under the ancient Iroko tree. They had discovered that knowledge shared becomes knowledge multiplied, that wisdom flows most freely between hearts that recognize each other's taste, and that sometimes the best teachers are found not in classrooms, but in the unexpected spaces where destiny arranges its most beautiful appointments. Like a confession whispered in the secret silence of a cathedral, Paul's truth spilled between them as golden and vulnerable as honey from a broken comb. I dream in melodies, not numbers. Every equation sounds like noise, but every rhythm tells me stories I can actually understand. The revelation hung in the air between them like incense, sweet and transformative. As Michael's eyes lit with the recognition of a kindred spirit, here was privilege wearing the mask of struggle, a boy drowning in expectations while his soul yearned for the freedom that only music could provide. Paul's fingers moved instinctively to tap rhythms on his knee, unconscious percussion that spoke louder than any academic transcript could ever whisper. Music is mathematics, Michael said, his voice carrying the wisdom of someone who had learned to find patterns in everything, in the chaos of Lagos traffic, in the rhythm of his mother's breathing, in the cadence of street vendors' calls. He began humming a popular Afrobeat song, his finger tracing mathematical ratios in the dust that corresponded to the musical intervals, showing Paul how the language of numbers was simply another dialect of the universal tongue that music spoke. Paul's face transformed like dawn breaking over the lagoon, understanding blooming in his features as the connection between his passion and his struggles became clear as morning light. So when I feel a 4/4 beat, I'm actually doing fractions? The wonder in his voice was that of someone discovering that the key to their prison had been hanging around their neck all along, disguised as an ornament they had never thought to examine. The Iroko tree swayed above them, its leaves whispering ancient secrets to the evening breeze, as two very different boys discovered that their differences were actually harmonies waiting to be arranged into a symphony. In that moment, beneath the patient branches of a tree that had weathered countless storms, the foundation was laid for a friendship that would prove music and mathematics were simply two instruments in the same eternal orchestra. Like alchemists discovering the secret formula that transforms base metal into gold, Michael and Paul unlocked the ancient mystery of learning, that knowledge dances most gracefully when it moves to the heartbeat of passion rather than the mechanized pulse of academic obligation. The afternoon sessions beneath the Iroko tree became legendary among the leaves that witnessed their transformation. Michael would arrive each day carrying more than just textbooks. He brought the street wisdom of Lagos, the rhythm of Survivor, and the patient grace of someone who had learned to find music in the mathematics of mere existence. Paul brought his restless energy, his technological fluency, and most importantly, his hunger for a way of learning that spoke to his soul rather than his parents' expectations. They developed a language uniquely their own, trigonometry set to the rhythm of Burna Boy beats, chemistry formulas wrapped to the cadence of street life, history lessons that flowed like the narratives in indigenous folk songs. Paul's smartphone became their DJ booth, streaming backing tracks while Michael transformed academic content into lyrics that stuck in memory like honey to fingers. Calculus derivatives found their groove in the rise and fall of traditional drums, while physics principles danced to the electronic pulse of contemporary Afrobeats. The transformation was nothing short of miraculous. Paul's grades began climbing like sunrise over the lagoon. Each improved test score, a note in an ascending melody that made both boys' hearts sing with possibility. More than academic success, though, something deeper was blooming. The recognition that learning was not a competition, but a collaboration. Not a burden, but a celebration. Not something to be endured, but something to be embraced like a favorite song on repeat. Mrs. Adebayo's eyes widened like morning glories, greeting unprecedented sunshine, as Paul Cole's latest test scores sprawled across her desk like a constellation of impossibility.
each perfect answer a star in a galaxy where academic miracles were supposedly extinct. The mathematics teacher had to remove her reading glasses and clean them twice before accepting what the red ink proclaimed across Paul's examination paper. 97% in calculus. From the same boy who had been averaging 42% just 6 weeks earlier, who had sat in her classroom like a well-dressed statue, present in body but absent in comprehension, his mind clearly wandering through corridors where numbers never learned to make sense. She traced her finger along his work, noting not just the correct answers, but the elegant methodology, solutions that showed creative approaches to complex problems, mathematical reasoning that sparkled with the kind of innovative thinking she hadn't witnessed in 2 decades of teaching. His handwriting had changed too, flowing with newfound confidence instead of the cramped anxiety that had characterized his previous attempts. Each equation was solved with a flourish, each step explained with clarity, as if mathematics had suddenly begun speaking his native language. The other teachers began to notice. In the faculty lounge, conversations turned to Paul's miraculous transformation. Whatever tutor the Coles hired this time is what they are waiting gold, Mrs. Johnson from English Literature commented, stirring her teeth thoughtfully. The boy is participating in discussions, offering insights that show that he's actually reading the assignment. But Mrs. Adebayo kept her suspicions to herself. The way Paul's eyes would drift toward the window during lessons, the subtle smile that played at his lips when certain melodies floated from the music room. That evening, as Lagos hummed the Titana song outside her apartment window, Mrs. Adebayo graded papers with a heart full of teacher's joy, the purest form of professional satisfaction that comes from witnessing a student's breakthrough. She didn't know about the Iroko tree, about the boy who learned through windows, or about the mathematical symphonies being composed in the afternoon heat. But she knew miracle when she saw it, and Paul Cole's transformation was nothing less than educational magic made manifest in red ink and rising numbers. Richard Cole's marble-floored office fell silent as his assistant's voice carried the impossible news through his phone speaker. "Sir, Mrs. Adebayo from St. Augustine's Academy wishes to discuss Paul's remarkable academic progress. She says she's never witnessed such a dramatic transformation in her 20-year teaching career." The billionaire tech mogul set down his gold-plated fountain pen with the deliberate precision of a man processing information that didn't compute with his previous calculations. Paul's academic progress, the same Paul who had cycled through 17 different tutors in 3 years, the boy whose report cards had become anthologies of disappointment, each graded paper a fresh chapter in the ongoing novel of parental frustration that had become Richard's most challenging business problem. Mrs. Adebayo's voice crackled through the phone line like electricity through copper wire, each word charged with the excitement of an educator who had witnessed the impossible. "Mr. Cole, I must ask, which agency provided this new tutor? Paul's mathematical reasoning has become extraordinary. His problem-solving approaches show creativity I haven't seen since, well, perhaps never. He's not just memorizing formulas anymore. He's understanding the poetry of mathematics." Richard's mind raced through the mental database of academic interventions he had orchestrated. Oxford graduates with sterling credentials, Cambridge-educated mathematicians with published papers, MRT alumni with Silicon Valley success stories. None had managed to unlock his son's potential. None had even made a dent in Paul's academic apathy. The most recent tutor, Dr. Williams from Imperial College London, had resigned after 6 sessions with a politely worded email about fundamental incompatibilities with the student's learning style. "Mrs. Adebayo," Richard said carefully, his business instincts sensing an opportunity wrapped in a mystery, "I need to be completely honest with you. We haven't employed any new tutoring services. Paul has been managing his studies independently for the past month." The silence that followed was the kind that occurs when two puzzle pieces that should fit together refuse to align, when the mathematics of cause and effect encounter variables that weren't included in the original equation. That evening, as Lagos stretched beneath him like a circuit board of light, Richard Cole faced a question that all his billions couldn't immediately answer. What force had transformed his son's academic trajectory, and why hadn't his vast resources been able to purchase what someone or something was apparently providing for free? Richard Cole's Bentley purred through Lekki's amber evening like a steel predator stalking truth, his heart hammering against his ribs with the syncopated rhythm of talking drums, announcing the arrival of answers he wasn't sure he was prepared to receive. Behind the wheel of his $250,000 vehicle, the tech billionaire found himself engaged in the most important research project of his life. Not market analysis or competitor intelligence, but the mystery of his son's miraculous transformation. His usual arsenal of private investigators and corporate security felt inadequate for this delicate mission. Some discoveries required a father's eyes, a parent's intuition, the kind of intelligence that money couldn't purchase but love could.
Like a divine revelation written in afternoon shadows and chalk dust, the scene beneath the ancient Iroko tree unfolded before Richard Cole's disbelieving eyes. His privileged son and a streetwise boy transforming mathematics into music, their voices creating harmonies that made calculus sound like gospel sung in perfect pitch. Richard approached the secret space with the reverence of someone entering a cathedral where miracles were actively being performed. The sound reached him fast. Paul's laughter, genuine and unrestrained, the kind of joy his son hadn't expressed about academics since childhood. Then Michael's voice, patient as rain on leaves, explaining derivatives with metaphors that painted pictures in the air. Think of it like the way a drama changes tempo. The derivative tells you how fast the beat is accelerating or slowing down. The billionaire stood frozen at the edge of their natural classroom, watching his son's face illuminate with understanding as Michael drew parallels between calculus and Afrobeat rhythms. Paul's notebook lay open between them, pages filled with equations that had been solved with confidence rather than conquered through struggle. For the first time in his academic life, Paul looked like he belonged in the world of learning, not as a reluctant visitor, but as a native speaker of a language he had finally learned to understand. Michael sensed the adult presence first, his survival instincts finely tuned to shifts in atmospheric pressure that accompanied authority figures. He looked up to see a man whose expensive clothing and powerful bearing marked him as someone from Paul's world, the world of air-conditioned cars and private security, of solutions purchased rather than discovered. Yet something in the stranger's expression wasn't the usual parental impatience or teacher's frustration that Michael had learned to recognize and avoid. "Don't stop on my account," Richard said softly, settling onto a nearby root with the careful grace of someone who had forgotten how to sit on the ground but was determined to remember. "I'm just observing a masterpiece in..." Study sessions in the Cole Mansion's library became sacred rituals where Michael and Paul discovered that friendship transcends the boundaries of blood, their minds dancing together through academic challenges like twin souls who had finally found their matching rhythm in the symphony of shared learning. The library transformed into their private universe each afternoon, its mahogany shelves standing like witnesses to the miraculous alchemy occurring between two boys whose different worlds had collided to create something neither could have achieved alone. Michael's street wisdom met Paul's technological fluency in conversations that sparkled with intellectual electricity, their different perspectives illuminating subjects from angles that surprised even themselves. Mathematics remained their sacred language, but now their academic conversations expanded like ripples on water to encompass literature, science, history, and philosophy. Paul's natural creativity, once frustrated by traditional teaching methods, bloomed under Michael's patient guidance, like flowers finally receiving their perfect combination of sunlight and rain. Meanwhile, Michael's brilliant mind, previously constrained by limited resources, stretched its wings in the endless library of possibilities that Paul's world provided. They developed study rhythms that honored both their strengths, Michael's methodical approach to problem-solving balanced by Paul's intuitive leaps of understanding, late-night discussions that dissolved the boundaries between homework and friendship, collaborative projects that felt more like artistic compositions than academic assignments. Their teachers began to notice not just improved grades, but transformed approaches to learning,
questions that showed deeper thinking, insights that revealed genuine engagement, participation that carried the energy of students who had now remembered why education mattered. The mansion staff watched with knowing smiles as the two boys fell asleep over textbooks in the library, their heads bent together over shared notebooks, like brothers who had found each other across the artificial divisions of class and circumstance. In the gentle lamplight of evening study sessions, surrounded by thousands of books and infinite possibility, Michael and Paul were writing the most important lesson of all, that true education happens not when information is transferred from teacher to student, but when hearts recognize each other across any distance and minds choose to grow together toward the light. Their friendship became a testament that wealth shared multiplies rather than divide, that knowledge passed between willing hearts creates abundance that no economy can measure, and that sometimes the most valuable inheritance is not what parents leave their children, but what children discover when they learn to see themselves reflected in each other's eyes. Report cards arrived at the Cole mansion like love letters from the universe, each A grade, a star sewn into the fabric of impossibility, as both boys discovered that excellence blooms most beautifully in the soil where different dreams learn to fertilize each other's growth. The academic transformation was nothing short of miraculous. Michael's grades blazed across his transcript like constellation patterns, each subject revealing the natural brilliance that had been waiting for proper cultivation. Mathematics singing at 98%, literature dancing at 96%, sciences homing at 97%. But more remarkable was Paul's metamorphosis. The boy who once struggled with basic algebra was now solving complex equations with the fluid grace of someone who had finally learned to speak his mind's native language. Mrs. Adebayo called their results unprecedented in the academy's 60-year history. Two students whose academic partnership had elevated both beyond what either could have achieved individually. Their collaborative projects became legendary among faculty members, assignments that read like symphonies, composed by minds that had learned to harmonize their different strengths into academic music that made teachers pause and wonder. The other students watched with a mixture of admiration and amazement as Michael and Paul moved through their classes like academic dancers, their questions sparking discussions that transformed routine lessons into intellectual adventures. They had become the school's most unlikely success story, the street-smart boy and the privileged son whose friendship had unlocked educational magic that textbooks never contained. Principal Adebayo summoned both families for a meeting that felt more like a celebration than a conference. Gentlemen, she announced with the gravity of someone delivering prophecy, these boys have not only exceeded every academic benchmark, they have redefined what excellence looks like when authentic collaboration meets genuine dedication. Her words carried the weight of recognition that transcended grades and touched the deeper mathematics of human potential realized. As evening painted the mansion's library in golden light, the two friends sat surrounded by their perfect report cards, yet their greatest achievement wasn't recorded on any transcript. They had proven that education's most profound lesson isn't found in any curriculum, that learning reaches its highest expression not in competition, but in communion, not in isolation, but in the sacred space where different minds choose to grow together toward wisdom that belongs to both and neither, created fresh every day in the garden where friendship and knowledge dance as eternal partners. Acceptance letters floated through the mansion's morning light like golden butterflies, carrying promises of international possibilities. Each prestigious university seal a passport to futures that stretched beyond Lagos horizons toward academic destinations that had once existed only in the realm of impossible dreams. The dining room table became an altar of achievement as letter after letter arrived, bearing the emblems of institutions that most students could only imagine: Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, MIT, Stanford. Michael's fingers trembled as he opened each envelope, reading acceptances that felt surreal, 4 scholarships to universities that had become legendary in his imagination, offers that would transform him from street corner observer to international scholar in the span of a single semester. Paul's acceptances arrived with equal abundance, though his carried the additional weight of family expectation and generational tradition. The Cole men have attended Harvard for 4 generations, his father announced proudly, though Paul's eyes lingered longest on the acceptance from Berklee College of Music, an admission that represented rebellion disguised as academic achievement, passion dressed in the respectable clothing of higher education. The irony wasn't lost on either boy. Michael, who had learned through windows and studied by streetlight, now held keys to the most exclusive educational institutions in the world. Paul, who had been born into educational privilege, was finally excited about learning for the first time in his academic life. Their different paths had converged beneath an Iropo tree and now diverged toward destinations they would approach with hearts shaped by shared experience. Richard Cole watched the boys examine their options with the satisfaction of someone whose investment had yielded returns beyond his most optimistic projections. Yet something deeper moved beneath his businessman's pride, the recognition that Michael's transformation from street wisdom to scholarly excellence represented more than academic success. It was testimony to human potential that transcends circumstance, proof that talent exists everywhere but opportunity remains precious and unevenly distributed. As Lagos stretched beyond the mansion's windows, pulsing with its eternal rhythm of struggle and aspiration, two young men who had found brotherhood in the space between privilege and poverty now faced the beautiful burden of choosing which dreams to pursue first. Their acceptance letters were more than admission tickets. They were certificates of possibility, documentation that friendship could indeed unlock doors that wealth alone could never open, passports to futures that would be forever marked by the wisdom they had discovered in each other's company. Paul's rebellion erupted like Afrobeat rhythms refusing to be contained by classical expectations as his heart chose the dangerous path of artistic authenticity, his soul declaring war against the comfortable prison of family tradition that had been built around him with gold bars and generational pride. The Harvard acceptance letter lay abandoned on his bedroom desk like a discarded costume from a play he no longer wanted to perform in, while Paul's fingers moved across his keyboard with the desperate passion of someone finally speaking their native language after years of forced translation. Music poured from his room like water breaking through a dam, compositions that carried the weight of suppressed dreams finally giving permission to breathe in the open air of possibility. Business management has been the Cole family foundation for generations. Richard's voice carried the authority of someone who had never considered that foundations might sometimes require renovation rather than replication. Music is a hobby, Paul, not a career path for someone with your advantages and responsibilities. Each word landed like stones thrown at glass, creating cracks in the careful architecture of parental expectation that has shaped Paul's life since childhood. But something had changed in Paul during those months of learning beneath the Iroko tree, studying alongside someone whose dreams had survived poverty's attempt to murder them. Michael's example had taught him that authenticity was worth fighting for, that talent unexpressed was a form of spiritual death, and that sometimes the bravest choice was to disappoint people you love in order to honor the truth living in your own heart. The mansion filled with the tension of opposing forces, tradition battling innovation, security wrestling with passion, the known comfort of inherited paths confronting the terrifying exhilaration of creating something new. Paul's compositions grew more complex during this period. His music became the language through which he communicated everything his spoken words couldn't express about the battle between duty and dream that was tearing his heart in directions it had never been pulled before. Late at night, when Lagos hummed its nocturnal lullabies beyond his window, Paul would create melodies that carried the rhythm of his internal conflict, the heavy bass line of family expectation, battling against the soaring harmonies of personal aspiration, percussion sections that sounded like heartbeats deciding between safety and freedom, musical arguments that would resolve only when he found the courage to choose between the life he had been given and the life he wanted to create. As Michael's voice rose above the Lagos Music Festival crowd like a prayer finally receiving its answer, police sirens sliced through his crescendo like lightning splitting thunder, and handcuffs clicked against his wrist with the metallic finality of dreams being murdered in broad daylight. But whose song was it really, and who wanted it silenced? The National Theatre's main stage had become a cathedral of sound when Michael's debut performance was transforming 3,000 strangers into a single swaying congregation. His original composition, Window Dreams, reveals a conspiracy deeper and more dangerous than anyone imagined. The music has stopped, the curtain has fallen, but the story is just beginning. Watch out for part 2.